Hello and welcome to the Eddie Conversation Podcast. My name is Eddie Vigil. This is episode 102. Joining me today is Brian Brucklacher.
Hi.
Hey, good to have you on the show.
Thanks.
I want to give a little brief intro to who you are to me. I consider you a friend. I've known you through sports. I've known you through game nights. I've known you as you've done a lot in your time from me knowing you to from when I've met you to now, and I want to talk about a little bit of the journey. You're also a father, you're a husband, but I'll throw the question to you to kind of start it off. Is how it's a vague question, but how do you think about yourself and because I talk to a lot of filmmakers on the show, it's usually oh, I'm a director or I'm an actor. But how do you say, hey, I'm Brian and I'm how do you see it?
I mean, the most paramount thing for me is, being a husband and a father, and that's kind of been my guiding force since I was a child. I knew at a very, very early age that what I really wanted, I had two older sisters that were about 5 and 7 years older than me, and wanting so badly to have a younger sibling. As I grew older, that translated to wanting to be a father. And you are the reason I met my wife. She was your roommate at the time. And if it wasn't for, had I met her when I was 20 years old, I would have got married when I was 20 years old. I knew what I wanted, and I just needed that final puzzle piece of my wife. And so, as far as to answer your question, I see that first and foremost. I'm currently a sheriff deputy, and that seems to be kind of a role that I'm falling into as far as an identity, but I hesitate to do that because there's so much more to life than your career, even if it is one as meaningful as being a cop. And it's something that I'm coming around to as someone who didn't have aspirations to be a cop until, about a year and a half ago.
Great. Okay, that makes sense. And I like that. Yeah, life is more than just the work you do. And that's kind of almost I know that's a journey that I'm also on. Okay, how important is work and the work-life balance, and hearing about. I want to dive more into a lot. I'm, of course, talking about the transition into sheriff deputy is a whole story that we can jump into. Before that, though, I do want to reflect a little bit. That's where we are now. I want to kind of go back to the past a little bit and reflect on some of early memories with you specifically. I know, thinking about you, I remember thinking about how dependable you were, how reliable you were, showing up to stuff that I was hosting. I think stuff we were doing early on was ultimate frisbee hangouts. You were inviting me to some things like that. I would do these game nights where we would play Twister as the highlight event, and you were I'm guessing still are competitive. We would have brackets and champions, and you, from my perspective, showed a lot of pride into winning those tournaments. But how do you, the competitive nature showing up. If I had a theme of the night, okay, we're doing Twister, but this one month I want to do pick a color of the Twister mat and show up representing a color. You would always come dressed up. That meant a lot to me. Being okay, we're doing capture the flag. Come as we would dress up for stuff, and you would go full. You would lean full in on those things. So how do you, thinking back to then? This is pre Nora, some of it. So what was your mindset in terms of the 100% and showing up, or how did you see all that? Because that's just my perspective.
Yeah, growing up, I was uber competitive, and I like to think that I've been able to simmer that down to a degree, at least outwardly. So I still battle with myself inwardly to kind of hold myself to a high standard as far as achievement and things like that. But I don't know, I guess, how much I've simmered it down because my kids are, arguing to be the first to brush their teeth, the first in the car, the first at everything. Even, the 2-year-old is demanding to be the first and fighting all three of her siblings off to be able to get to that role. So it's definitely ingrained in me and it's passed down through to each of my kids. As far as, those events, I just love to compete in such a way that, like, if there's any chance that some sort of game or some sort of exciting competition can be had, I'm gonna make sure that I'm one of the numbers there to make sure it happens. And I know how hard it is to herd cats and get people to do that sort of thing because, well, people like to play games. Getting people just to do anything is difficult, especially as we get older. People just seem to get so ingrained in doing nothing, and it's sad because I guess my inner child is still alive and strong, and maybe my inner child was more of a child than others, but I really loved every single type of competitive nature, and as far as what you were putting on, it was more than just like twisters. You'd have 8 different board games and things, and you'd have tournaments, and you'd have seedings, and you'd have all sorts of stuff, and it was really just a wonderful get together of dozens of our friends, and yeah, it was just really a highlight of that period of my life where there were so many games and things going on, and it really just made that age really just a lot of fun things just occurred, and just it was really, I guess, leaned into my natural tendency to be competitive and to have so much fun because I the lack of that just feels depressing to me.
Yeah, I recall. Well, it's nice to hear that. Now, of course, yeah, I it was it's a lovely phase of time for sure. I remember like yeah, the games being the idea was them being a space for connection and a space for like the quick turnarounds too kept it active where it's like you're not just sitting down to like Settlers of Catan for 3 hours with a small group. It was trying to keep it moving. So yeah, I'm glad. No, it's fun to look back on that. I was reflecting on. I have an album on. I don't even know if it's public, but on Facebook with all the Twister Night champion photos, and I was like, how many championships did Brian have again? And do you remember offhand how many you won?
No, I've learned as I've gotten older that memory is not one of my strong suits,
Okay.
and um, but yeah, no, I don't
So
try to live in the moment, I guess,
yeah,
as I get
I'm
older.
trying to think. The goal there was one specific year where I held it once a month, and then it kind of petered off after that. But it was so essentially we had 12 months, and within that 12 months, there were two players that tied for the number one.
Me,
Uh,
me and Mike, or me
you
and
and Lily,
oh,
each with 4 wins. I think we had maybe it peters off after that year, but you had 4 championship victories during that time,
hmm.
and I just want to give you the credit now. Like it's fun. It's fun. I know that I was always trying to be up there and take you down, but
I
it's
don't make it easy. I try not to.
yeah, no, it keeps it fun. Okay, that's then. And like you said, you've since then a lot has happened.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm trying to figure out how to best jump into it. Like maybe let's jump to the current transitions, and I want to hear what it's like being a sheriff deputy, and a little bit of what you're willing to share about that transition, and feel free to give context to moments before or other professions. Like we can jump into all that because I know some, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'll just start with like a general background of how I got to that point. You know, Originally I wanted um, to be in kind of the corporate world, in the corporate world or the finance world, I guess more accurately. I got a master's in economics and was going to move to Singapore, but in my final semester I met my wife, and as I stated before, it's a lot more important for me to have family close by because we knew we wanted to start a family quite soon. And so I tried to repurpose that degree, and basically I became a CPA. I went back to school, and in doing so, I forgot one of the lessons in economics, which is a sunk cost, which my past decisions shouldn't affect my decisions going forward. I shouldn't allow that. And I basically didn't want to throw away my prior education. And so I was trying to leverage it into something else business related. And I chose accounting, which was something I never actually enjoyed. Um, and in doing so, I climbed the corporate ladder. I became a CFO at Access to Healthcare Network. But as I continued on that path, I just became more and more unhappy with the type of work I was doing. Not the business and not the organization, not the people, but just the nature of accounting itself. And I left that business to help my wife's business grow and expand. Ended up working for another one and kind of had the same sort of feeling, and got to a point where I was going through some mental health issues of just depression and anxiety of not being able to motivate myself in a way that felt healthy for my career. And kind of simultaneously along the way, I took a trip to Peru, and one of the lessons I learned and I took away from that was a lack of humility that I didn't realize I was lacking. And what I mean by that is, like, I don't I don't feel like I was boastful or prideful, or at least I tried not to be. But I realized that my thoughts and kind of my interactions with people, if I didn't respect their opinion or their point of view, I would be very respectful and cordial with the conversation, but I wouldn't necessarily have that same respect in my heart. And I learned, quite quickly, from that lesson and trying to go internally. One of the things that I held pretty vehemently was my atheism, and I took the next couple of years to I explored Buddhism, I explored Hinduism, and I explored Christianity. Those were the three biggest. And it got to a point where it culminated where I was doing a cold plunge in the Truckee River, and in that moment, I was I would do it for 3 minutes, and I would look at my watch, and there was about 5 seconds left, and I was counting down the 5 seconds. This was in the about 32 degrees because I think there was ice chips on the water in December, and yeah, at the very last second, I felt a hand on my shoulder as I was literally praying to Jesus and asking for forgiveness for some of my past mistakes. And I looked over, and there was a little popped blood vessel on my shoulder, and my rational, analytical mind, instantly justified it, and so I was like, "Oh, that's what it was." And as I turned my head back, and the hand came back, and it was as clear as day, just like it was the first time. You could feel every finger. You could feel the thumb on the back. It was just a supporting hand, and I struggled for a long time to kind of justify that with coming from someone who was so, like, I was not agnostic to any degree. I was full on atheist. I believed everything was meaningless. And I even, ironically enough, I describe myself as a Christian atheist because I you know, found brotherhood in people that believed in Christ, and I believed in their morals and stuff. But at the same time, I had no belief whatsoever in God, and it's. But as I was praying, asking for Jesus' name, as I was 33 years old, like, there's so many parallels that kind of layered into this, and it's not even enough time in this podcast to go into all of the little details, but I had an experience that over the next few months, I had a lot of questions, and I had a lot of answers just kind of flow into me. And one of the directions that I felt very pulled to was to be a sheriff deputy, in which I had never had any interest in up until that point. And so I guess that's how I got there. But really finding that trust in God. And then, since then, I've really opened up and, just reading different pages and passages of the Bible, it's blown my mind. And again, that piece of humility of actually just asking the questions or looking into what does this actually mean? Like what, like that block of this is ignorant, this is old, this is stupid, this is fairy tales. Once that block is gone and you actually just give it a chance, so many answers come to you in your life that it's hard to rationalize in an analytical way.
There's a lot there.
Yeah,
A lot there. Like you said, we can host multiple episodes of this just diving through all that. I mean, this sounds like quite the journey, and like you said, finding trust in God, discovering essentially humility within yourself. Those sound, yeah, very, very impactful breakthroughs. And I'm trying to also blend that into how nice it is to hear and get that, like, from the perspective of, again, tying it back into, I'm still curious on connecting the dots to the sheriff deputy, but I don't know what your perspective was on cops pre beer breakthroughs and then how you visualize the field now. But I personally um, feel safe thinking about you being a sheriff deputy with humility and trust in God, because like the especially in the world that we're in now, there's a lot of like skepticism and lack of trust, kind of from civilian to sheriff deputy or cop kind of stuff. So anyway, I'm happy that
yeah,
you're there. But yeah, there's not really a question in there, but maybe
yeah.
how.
Something popped.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think initially I'm a hyper libertarian, and I see, all the government waste, which, is being highlighted in today's world. But there's a feeling that, police had shifted to the point where, and this was, pre George Floyd and all that. I had this belief that it was to serve and protect the law as opposed to serve and protect the people. And in my heart, I feel, serving and protecting the people is obviously, much more paramount in what in an idealistic world the police would be doing. And going into this field, I had a bias that, that was much more, a sheriff deputy type thing, was more about the people, and maybe police, meaning like city police or metro or something like that, is more about the law, more about cracking down on things that maybe I feel are need to be changed. And it's been humbling again, just the last few years is layer after layer of humility to see the amount of good people, from the instructors in the academy to the just that are there, on the police side or the deputy side for 100% the right reasons, that aren't making these sort of unnecessary arrests just because the law says they can. There's a lot of discretion that's going on for all the right reasons. So that's been really humbling. And as far as how it came to from the desire, like I said, it just popped into my head, and it's more trusting in that feeling that I believe is the Holy Spirit, and trying to lean into wherever it feels like I'm being pulled. And if it's something that I haven't done before, it's that much more that I should lean into it and trust that, you know, that's where God's taking me.
Okay, yeah. That essentially, I was gonna ask about. I think almost answers the question, but maybe I'll ask it anyway because I do want to hear about it popping into your head, and then how much work it took to the point of putting the uniform on, essentially, like the application process, the training, the like. There's so many tiers, and I've heard a little bit. We talked a little bit yesterday, but what I'm hearing is you trusted in God and you followed through, but I'm wondering what else was going on in there that kept you pushing forward despite like the hurdles to accomplish this latest
Well, I think
direction.
one driving factor was, being a CPA, that's seen as a very stable job. Um, but the way that I viewed it mentally, because I couldn't see myself doing it long term, it felt very unstable. It felt like, you know, whereas the difference being with I saw this as an opportunity also for me to give that stability to my family of something that I felt being a physical job, something that I would have to be on my feet, have to use my hands regularly. Um, Felt very in tune with my ability to um, I guess, exercise my brain while simultaneously exercising my body. And I think that's just, as I've gotten older, is something I've picked up on. And as far as like the whole process, I would say, yeah, I mean, I went into this knowing nothing about the process, or kind of, I'm sure a lot of people don't realize there's the narrative that, police aren't getting adequate training in this. So to enlighten us as far as, I didn't even know. I have heard of the police academy. You go, it was here in Nevada, at least it's about 6 months, and you do everything you can imagine, from having actual shootouts, high risk vehicle stops. Like you go through every hypothetical with many reps, and they put you in the most high stress situations they can without, actually shooting at you with real guns, to the idea that they want police to be as adequately prepared when shit actually hits the fan, so that they have the muscle memory to know exactly how to react. And I could see that improvement just from the first drill we would do to the drills we would do at the end. And they're entirely different scenarios, but the same principle, the same muscle memory is being activated. And not just in myself, but in my peers, you really see that. And then going forward, like they do trainings twice a year that are these same, sort of scenarios where you're in these situations that might only come up once in your career, but when that situation comes up, you've seen it before. And yeah, just another reason to give me to kind of flip my views on police work in general, and to get more trust in at least what's going on here in Nevada.
Okay. Yeah, so you're painting the picture of like the way that I'm receiving it is like stress tests and scenarios and like like a reenactment of a scene is almost how I see it, where they set up a scenario, you walk into a room with like paid actors or
Yeah,
like yeah,
except all the paid actors are other, police officers or sheriff deputies, and we're using, guns that still hurt, but they're not actual bullets. They're different types. But you're doing every scenario that they're doing is one that has actually happened in real life, and something that they've seen, where maybe mistakes were made from by another agency or something, because these are, nationwide cases that come up where maybe a mistake was made. They reenact it to make sure that when that scenario or a similar scenario comes up again, um, everyone knows exactly what to do, and has had that rep to know exactly what to do.
yeah, that makes sense. And something that popped into my head too was the curiosity regarding, and this is topical in a way, and I guess this is why I'm asking it too. Is the like de-escalation
Mhm.
and that kind of training? Um, how much like what does that look like in terms of those scenarios and how things play out? And like I don't, yeah,
Yeah, so de-escalation's touched on, quite a lot. Like every scenario, they say your best tool is your voice, being able to speak to the person and to hear them, and to exactly what you said, de-escalate. But we even, have a whole week dedicated just specifically to de-escalation techniques and practices. But, you know, just that week alone, we're also doing it in every single moment that we do that touch on. Because in the end, you want the least intrusive response, or the least intense response possible to resolve any situation, because that's the goal of police work, is not to create a high stress situation. It's to calm the community, is to save as many lives, is to protect as many people, and do it as justly. And sometimes you have to make hard decisions, but if you can minimize the amount of hard decisions you have to make, that's the goal there.
That makes sense. And I think I'm also recalling your framework in terms of your own almost, I don't know if this is personal philosophy, but the fact that you were kind of like bumping up against like I'm not here to protect the law. I'm here to protect the people. So I'm imagining you in any scenario, you're thinking about the person and the people involved, and that's kind of like your default initial instinct, and that's lovely to hear. It yeah, no, it's very nice.
And it's not as rare as you might think,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
mindset.
Thank you for clarifying. That's no, no, it's super helpful. It's scary times out there. I like what you said too about your finding your own way to stability for the family regarding like the work that you do, and that this is an engaging field which keeps you on your toes. It keeps you. The word that I was thinking was engaged versus like sitting at a desk
Hmm.
or doing your accounting, which sounds like torture. Um, how are you enjoying it so far now that you're kind of like you're in it, and how long have been at it, I guess?
Yeah, so I've been at it about 4 months, so it's still obviously fresh, but just being so diametrically, you know, different than what I've done in the past, every day feels like a blessing in that regard. It's another opportunity to be doing something physical, man. I think I was at a point where, before this, I wanted to lay brick or do something like, roofing or something, because I was just yearning for that sort of physicality. And while I'm still doing reports and stuff as well as in police work, just being on my feet and having that opportunity to be moving around and using my hands when necessary, like it's just really good for my mental health. And um, I have ADHD as well, and so that's another thing where I think that people with ADHD are drawn, either knowingly or unwittingly, to police work or the military, and I've heard that before. So that might be part of it, is
Okay.
that connection.
Yeah, and being that you bring up ADHD, I was kind of actually curious from what your perspective. I don't recall. Maybe it's just because we didn't talk about it, but how long is this like a recent diagnosis, or did you go through a process to get diagnosed, or do you have an ADHD journey specifically to coming to understanding yourself in that way, or?
Yeah, so you wouldn't have known, because Nora, my wife, being a therapist, was like, "Hey, by the way, you have ADHD," and so she's like, "You need to go get tested, because being your wife, and you're not my patient, I can't diagnose you." But so I went and saw um, a psychologist at around, I think I was probably 26 years old, and yeah, I had no idea, but as I started doing my own research and kind of obsessing over that, I would see, box after box after box that I would check off that, were very much in alignment with, you know, not necessarily the most classic case of ADHD, but, um, and I was able to, I think, get by because growing up, I had a mom who was so structured and so just supportive in keeping me getting my stuff turned in and on time and this and that, and her level, her hyper organization, I think, allowed me to slip by without realizing, my diagnosis, like that. And fortunately, my intelligence, I think I was able to lean in on things where if I didn't have those tools, I couldn't skate by without noticing. um, but as I got older, and some of those tools fell to the wayside, like I didn't have obviously my mom, in my life supporting me in the same way. I started to see the cracks, and my wife saw the cracks, and as I got officially diagnosed, yeah, it all started to make sense, and so much of my life started to make more sense.
I mean, that makes sense for sure. I remember talking yesterday a little bit too, talking about because this is I'll say like the way that my brain works is like you talked about being an excellent interviewer. Like you're great in an interview and you can get a job and you can you're great on your feet and you're great in like these moments where you have to piece stuff together quickly and figure stuff out
Hmm.
and I collapse
Hmm.
in those scenarios for sure. I need the long road of like baby steps to piece stuff together to then have confidence to, and then I struggle in the interview, but then I can lean on the experience factor.
Hmm.
And then you have like the opposite track of like you can hop in and somehow work your way through those moments, which I don't
Oh,
know how you
I
do
think,
it.
I mean, I cringe as you say that because I feel like I'm kind of, you know, struggling to a degree in this interview, but I guess that's my own, self-criticism. But I think when it's like a job interview or something of that nature, there is like an ADHD quality where when you're in the most stressful situations, your brain can just turn it on to the point where things can slow down and you can kind of find the words that you're seeking. And I think that, and especially when it's only, job interviews sometimes only like 15 minutes or, it's quite brief, and you can gamify that. And I like, that's the way my brain works is, like my favorite class in college was game theory because I was always strategizing and figuring out, the most optimal way to handle any situation. And an interview is just that. And when I get into that stressful situation, my brain just goes into game mode. And yeah, and it's really helped me to be able to, I guess, put my best foot forward.
Yeah, no, it's been fun to watch from the outside looking in, just seeing like I struggle to keep track of the jobs that you've had over the years, but like whenever I hear about like what you're up to, I'm like, okay, well, you're not just doing something new, you're also like at like a high tier level of doing that thing. Like you mentioned the CPA, or even like you did some nonprofit work, like you're kind of like you're not coming in at like a bottom rung, like you're usually you climb very quickly, and I don't know how. I almost want to be like, how do you how do you how do how do you do that? Well, I know a lot of people want those, or maybe people don't want those positions, but that's something you push for. But how do you,
Well,
I
yeah,
don't know.
I would speak to like the latter point of just you're saying some people, want them, some people don't, is one of the things I've learned too is motivations of everyone is so intensely different. And like when I've been in senior roles as like the CFO, and I've done surveys with employees to kind of, get job satisfaction and motivations for, longevity and things like that. What I've noticed is my motivations are so incredibly different from there's dozens of different motivations that really drive people to the point where, you can give someone, a massive pay raise and a promotion, and then they can leave a week later because that had nothing to do. Like they could have no job lined up whatsoever and be ready to
Yeah.
leave because, they just wanted different work hours, or maybe just the energy changed and that's all they cared about. It's like, oh, it just feels different, so I'm done.
Hmm.
Whereas I think I've been able to kind of get to where I'm at is more, I was obsessed with, probably on the competitive side with growing as fast as possible. And because of that, I wasn't afraid to put my hat in the ring for things that probably were, above my weight class as far as I looked on paper. Um, but because I believed wholeheartedly that any job I was putting myself out for, I could do effectively. While I didn't have necessarily the experience to do that, I believed in my heart that I could do the job. And when I got there, I could do the job. It was just unfortunate that the job I chose was one that would make me unhappy. So I was able to climb quick, but I kind of climbed quick in an industry that I didn't necessarily, I shouldn't have been in to begin with.
Okay, that makes sense. Something that came to mind as you were talking, and I'm curious about is how do you see leadership and yourself in leadership positions, and do you enjoy it?
I think the enjoy it piece is what's giving me pause, um, because it's very much bittersweet in that I feel this yearning to both be in a leadership role and not be in a leadership role simultaneously, and it's um, I guess I, I want to be a leader in that I want to have a positive impact on the situation or the organization, but I don't want to be in a leader in that I don't want to separate myself from my peers. And that's, I think, if you want to talk about an effective leader, it's that idea that, the leader eats last. You feed all of your people and then you eat last. And you do the same work. You don't put yourself above the work that your employees are doing. Like if you need to pick up the slack, you're not above that work. You pick up the slack and you lead with that servant leadership, and then that allows basically everyone that's working for you sees you as, oh, this guy's not afraid to come down to our level to do our same thing. I want to help support him because he's helping to support me when I need it the most, so I'm going to help support him. And I think in general the best leaders are people that don't want to be leaders, people that, which is why I think there's so much corruption in the world and so much, because the people that typically become leaders are the people that are driven by power, and not necessarily the best leaders are the ones that are on the ground level who just never would seek it out because they're good at what they do and they're not seeking the power to begin with. They're frustrated. But yeah, if you could hand select leaders, the world would be a whole lot different.
So a little almost, it doesn't sound necessarily like reluctant leading, but yeah, there's that little bit of
I kind
that,
of like that reluctant leading.
okay. Yeah. It's like, well, I'd rather do it and do it right than, like you said, the power person up on top mismanaging. I I mean, that's definitely what I've been thinking about with leadership is you kind of described, well, you described it as coming down to the level, and I know for me, I've definitely tried to level out the playing field and just everybody essentially, the almost this is not what it's called, but I'm thinking like an equality theory, where it's we have different responsibilities,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't mean like the ladder system can kind of hurt the verticalness of it. So just being like I have different responsibilities, but everybody here is equally important to making this work, and and giving support through that kind of mindset. But I don't. That's not necessarily what you said, but that's kind of how
Yeah,
I
no,
see
that
it.
that's I think that's pretty close. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I want to do a little, maybe a little transition here. We've referenced her a couple times. Nora, your
Better half.
your wife, and she's been on the podcast before, so check out her episode too. But she had a question for you.
Oh boy. There's the surprise.
Okay, the question is, what has surprised you about becoming a husband and a father, and what wisdom might you impart to others when the going gets tough?
Yeah. Um, what surprised me? Yeah, I'm very unprepared. Um, I don't know. I feel like Michael Scott trying to think his way through the answer as he's answering it.
Yeah.
Um, but I guess I'll find it along the way. So, what was the second part? I'll start at the back
Yeah,
end.
okay. Let me pull it back up here. So,
And then wisdom. So I guess wisdom
yeah.
would be I'll go with the two um, things that I think are the most important, I guess, lessons to instill in your kids. And one of them I've kind of held on to from the bulk of my life, which is accountability, because through accountability uh, comes empowerment. And so, like, if you take everything on your shoulders and you say, you know what, it doesn't matter what the world threw at me, it doesn't matter how awful this situation is, there's something I could have done differently to not be in this situation. Like I could have, even if it's like you got in a car accident, and someone just hits you and you're at a red light and that's as not your fault as it could possibly be. Maybe, if your day had been a little bit different because did something, you could have left 5 minutes earlier because you were going to arrive right on time for the meeting and you should have actually left 5 minutes earlier so you could be 5 minutes early for the meeting. Like you take that accountability on, maybe that's a bad example, but it allows you to then say, you know what, going forward, I have the power to change my situation. I have the power to get out of whatever struggle or hole that I'm in. Um, what I've learned in recent years, especially with Christ, is the flip side and equally as important with accountability is forgiveness. And you can have all the accountability in the world, but that can also drive you down to self-loathing and depression and blaming yourself for so much. But until you can forgive yourself, and especially forgive others and forgive yourself, that allows you to get balance that empowerment like to the highest degree, because you can take that accountability, but you can really flip it and say, you know what, I also forgive myself for that, and now I can do the right thing and I can become the best version of myself. So I think those are the two lessons I'm trying to instill in my children. um, and it's hard. It's hard to teach a child not to be a victim, because the world is scary when you're little, and there's lots of things, and you don't want to take accountability for what your sister did to you. Um, but as far as the biggest thing I learned as being a parent and being a husband, I think, I mean, I don't know, it feels kind of like a fairy tale. It feels like exactly how I imagined it. It's hard. It's definitely hard, but everyone says it's hard, so like that's not a surprise. Um, I think it's it's something that everyone should pursue if they're able. I think the purpose of life here is partially to continue and to bring life into this world and to give love, and the best love you can give is through your offspring and the ripples that they create in this world. And so um, I don't really have something that I've learned. I guess I just have an encouragement for people to continue to have kids and to bring more love into the world.
Okay. All right. Yes. So yeah, you're encouraging people to pursue specifically you're talking about like having kids and getting like essentially relationship and children is there's a lot to like you said. Okay, well let me rewind it back a little bit. Now that I'm finding my own answer, Michael Scott way as I'm talking.
Yeah.
Um, Tell me what you expected it to be. So that because you mentioned that you weren't really surprised. This is fairy tale. It's kind of like you said it was hard, but everybody says it's hard. It's not a surprise there. But what other elements of becoming a father and a husband were you maybe um, I don't know, maybe there's surprise on like wait this is real and it like I imagine there's a version of this where you're like okay I got married and like almost like I was right. Like it's an odd feeling to be like, okay, I'm doing this thing and it's going exactly as planned. But what expectations were there starting all of the above, having children and starting in your marriage?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it went exactly as planned.
Hmm.
Um, there's so many hiccups that come along the way and so many struggles, and every relationship has things, fights and things that you overcome and things that make you stronger. Um, I just like, I don't know, it feels like perfectly imperfect sort of thing, that idea that which is a good way of looking at your own self, is like looking at your imperfections and learning to love those. And I think the same can be applied to your relationship and your your families and the things that happen along the way. If the mistakes that your kids make, that maybe you look back and you're like, you know what, that was a reflection on something that I did. Um, you know, that wasn't my child's action. That was my own actions being, shown, as a mirror to me. And I think I guess maybe that's something I've learned is that that mirror effect is tremendously powerful. And that idea that the best way you can teach your kids is not by teaching them in a traditional sense, but through your own actions, because your kids are going to most likely end up very similar to you, and you can, it's not do as I say, but do as I do, or however the phrase goes.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is facing yourself through each interpersonal relationship is kind of where it all lives is and I'm currently not in a relationship. I don't have any kids, but I that's exactly, yeah, that's what I hear, and what I'm hearing from you is the your partner that you choose, ideally there's someone who's gonna, this isn't, okay, I was gonna say challenge you, but you're gonna face parts of yourself that have yet to be faced, and you're gonna have to face that. And each child is also gonna impart that on you too. And it's just like you said, it's your reactions and your ability to face yourself seems to be the way to grow and rise, help the unit continue on.
Yeah,
Is that right? Okay,
that's
great. That sounds hard. Um,
hard but meaningful, and everything that is meaningful is hard.
I want to hear more about, almost back to talking about the spiritual journey.
Hmm.
What have you gleaned from, like, you've explored multiple religions, you've dived a lot, but can you tell me more about that journey?
Yeah, and there's like still so many questions that are unanswered with that journey, because, like, I mean, the world of spirituality is so vast, and especially the age that we live in, I feel like there's so many people coming to spirituality or Christianity or any religion in kind of, I don't know if it's just my perception, because if you look at graphs, I think it's the opposite, that people are becoming less religious, but it feels like in the last few years there's been this resurgence. And in my journey, like, I was doing mantras for a period with success, like tremendous success. I was manifesting. I was doing the cold plunges. I was doing the sauna. I was doing all this stuff and meditation and prayer. And like, some of the struggles I still have is like the stuff that I was doing. Let's say with mantras, for example, it felt um, there was no evil sense, or and I use the word evil because as I've come to this place, and especially after that experience in the river, I've felt like I've grown a sixth sense to be able to almost feel the energy of people, and feel like there's something right about this person as they enter the room, and something just inherently good about the energy they exude. Or the opposite, unfortunately, for certain people. And that doesn't mean I should be treating them differently, but it is something that I'm now attuned to. And that same feeling I can attribute to these experiences that I've had with, like I was saying, with mantras. And I never felt any sort of negative energy whatsoever in that realm. And so trying to reconcile that with Christianity, which I've now 100% leaned into, is a huge struggle for me. And as far as that goes, because false idols, like, a mantra is essentially chanting the name of a Hindu god. Like, how much more of a false idol can you get? But at the same time, like, you can take the puzzle piece of aliens and the things that are being disclosed these days, and all the weird stuff in the world going on in this moment, and how does any of that all fit into the puzzle? And it basically, what it comes down to is I just have to um, trust in God's plan, and trust that everything is God to a degree, and just try not to my obsession over understanding it is a seeking of like intellectual goods as opposed to seeking wisdom. And I think the main lesson I've taken away from all of that is that it's much better for me to seek wisdom than to seek information. And I've been trying to seek more wisdom.
Makes sense. And I'm also curious to maybe takeaways from, because like you mentioned, it sounds like uh, um, it sounds like Christianity is the one, like you said, you're leaning into that at this point. But
More so than leaning into that's yeah,
you know,
I am.
you, you have you're wearing the cross right now. I was curious on there if there's takeaways along the way from the other religions you explored, or if you're also including. I don't, there's you know.
Well, I mean, a lot of the lessons are the same. This, having love being a paramount, tenet of like what you're trying to do, and the idea of oneness is paramount in a lot of religions, which and with Christianity being the one God, but there's the Taoism having the yin and the yang and having good and evil. Like I believe wholeheartedly that there is good and evil forces at work in this world, and that's the yin and the yang. There's I think there's so much truth to be had in, and many people have found it in different ways. And just because it's necessarily not Christianity doesn't mean that there's not truths interweaved in it. And I think, from my perspective of a Christian perspective, God has interweaved, good and goodness and throughout the world um, before it had been touched by Christianity. And I think that I don't know, it's hard. That's my biggest struggle is this exact question. I think is trying to reconcile the positives, yet being different from where my belief is, and knowing that there are positives in these other religions. And so that honestly is my biggest struggle with my own spiritual journey.
Well, I'll say that listening to you talk about this, and I'm yeah, because I wasn't aware of course, like this recent journey of yours, and it's been nice to catch up. We're in Sparks, Nevada. I'm in town visiting
Hmm.
family, and it was nice to come and see you and the family. But hearing you talk about it all, this is definitely an avenue which I, for one reason or another, have in a way refused to explore. And hearing you talk about it, I was like, okay, it sounds similar. Maybe you even said it in this podcast at some point, but it sounds similar to I'm feeling a call to action in a way, similar to like you said, pursue relationship, pursue having kids. Is be open to exploring this, drop the humility and see what happens essentially. And I'm like, okay, it sounds like as difficult as any journey. And like you said, you're still it's I'm sure a lifelong journey in lots of respects. So um, I'm feeling compelled to listen and the seeds are being planted. It's kind of like, oh man, okay, Brian,
So,
jeez.
yeah, so like the one thing I would say is I feel like the biggest lie and the biggest issue um, is that with the idea of God and with the idea of Christianity, it's wholeheartedly seen by the vast majority of the world and the vast majority of America as the fairy tale, as old, as nonsense, to the point where no one will like in their head can cross that line to just say, yeah, I'll make a prayer, because to do so is to admit that you are open to this fairy tale, and like that is that big lie that is pervasive in people. And it's like, from my own experience, and I know there's plenty of people that will say they've tried and has had little come of it or this or that, but from my experience, just opening that door and getting past that barrier of not um, of just not willing to even just, I mean, it takes 5 seconds to just do a prayer, even if you don't believe it at all, just to do it and go through the repetition and see what happens in your life. If people would just do that, I think this world would just explode with, positivity in so many ways. But that is that big lie, that the fact that you're, at least planting a seed in your head, it warms my heart, and it's kind of, one of the reasons I'm happy to be talking today.
Yeah. Yeah, because the opposing voices, just to say them out loud, and I had a friend recommend a book to me recently, and I'm thinking about the book as you're saying it. I don't even know if I want to name it. It's essentially like it's like an atheist essay book. I appreciate the recommendation. I'm reading it, and
Mhm.
you take everything with a grain of salt, and is that the term? But early in the book, like the immediate dismissal, like almost this isn't the big lie that you're talking about, but it's the man-made. It's like it's man-made and it's man-manufactured and it's like a whole entity of corporation. It's been like like the man-made argument of like this all stems from stories and it's been meddled with throughout thousands of years and all that kind of stuff is the immediate dismissal of assent, even giving it the 5 seconds to like what's the truth in it and in that exploration. But again,
Well, as
the
far as being meddled with, I think I could get this wrong, but I believe it's the book of Isaiah that was one of the ones found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which was pretty close to when it was actually written. I think it's within like 100 years or a couple 100 years, but the earliest version we had before that I think was 1,000 years later, and so like the biblical scholars will correct me, 'cause I'm sure I'm far off on my dates, but essentially I think it was like almost carbon copy, word for word. The one that has been meddled with, the one that people said was issues, they then compared it to the book of Isaiah, which was you know from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years before in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it was the same. And so like the idea that it's been tweaked and this and that to serve the purposes of whatever church or government or king that was in power at that time, at least with that one example, which it was like you know flat on its face incorrect.
yeah,
It was exactly as it was originally written.
yeah, that makes sense. And I know the way that I'm receiving things now, like I said, the seeds are planted. It's nice, and I'm curious. And also, the way that I'm seeing it all together, it almost comes to the mishandling of how we communicate with other human beings in the first place. Of like almost like even talking about like being a father or the way the best way to be is through yourself and it's not really almost as direct of instilling things as you might think. So in terms of like living your life and pursuing your stuff and not necessarily saying the words of like, hey, believe what I believe and do what I do, like directly and outright,
Mm-hmm.
and allowing people to like the encouragement to explore and to be curious and see what happens like that. That sounds lovely. That sounds like the healthy way to go about it too, versus like come to my church and start doing all this stuff. Like that's not. It's more of a encouragement to explore, which I like.
Well, it's also a trust in that if I encourage you to explore, and if you do take that encouragement and just give it a chance, it's showing my own trust in God, that God will come through in you. So
Yeah,
I don't need you to do this exact recipe. I just need you to give it a chance. And then I put my trust in God to do the other, to finish the job. So,
I love it. I love it. That's nice. Oh, that's refreshing.
mm.
That's um. So taking that, I want to ask again. I want to jump into talking about emotions and me thinking about you like almost retroactively, almost maybe even throughout the years of I'm not in a relationship and I'm wondering I want you and I'm like, okay, you found your person. You had a connection and I know and you've admitted, I mean, things don't go as planned, things are difficult. And there's lots to work through. There's lots to repair. But I'm just like, Brian, how are you maintaining? You, like, I'm curious, emotionally speaking, how like the emotional journey within all of that with
Well,
healthy relationship and like it's vague to start, but
I think it's important to not lie to yourself with your partner in regards to, you guys can be infatuated with each other, but you have to have certain things in alignment. And one of those things being, your, your life, your not necessarily life goals, but your life, the things that drive you as far as your principles. And so having someone, if they have similar life goals, if they have similar principles, no matter what you're going through, you guys know you're still walking in the same direction. And if you can have trust in that person that they're going to continue to walk in the same direction, you're going to continue to walk in the same direction, then you both want to walk together. And you know that you're going to come back to each other because, like with Nora and I, if there's an issue, I may impatiently want to try to knock it out and work through it as quick as possible because I'm just such an impatient person. But if I can wait, I have full trust that Nora will always come back to it because I know in her heart she's walking the same path that I'm walking and she wants to walk the same path that I'm walking. So it doesn't matter what's going on in the moment, we're still going to be walking together. And it's a lot easier to come back together when you're walking in the same direction. And I think a lot of people, like a big one is, one person wants to have kids, the other one doesn't want to have kids, and they're like, "Oh, we'll just make it work," or I'll just concede, or I'll just do this, and then you plant seeds of resentment, and you can't lie to yourself about who you are. The idea that you don't change for your partner too is BS, and people are like, "Oh, I'm still me. I'm gonna be me." And that sort of ego is stupid because when you're with someone, you need to become almost like, while you are still your own person, you're also your own couple together, and you need to be able to grow together because if you don't, that's also planting seeds to make it easy to leave, easy to give up, easy to quit. And I think it's much more healthy to grow together as a couple. And I think the narrative these days is so much more like being that hyper independent person and don't change for anyone, be your own self, this and that. And I think that's just driving people to unhappiness because it's driving people to not have these, long standing relationships because they think that's the right thing to do. And then in the end, they're, the relationship after relationship after relationship. And then they're, living their life struggling to find that happiness. And yeah, so I guess those are the the advice I would give.
yeah, I'm curious about these principles you talk about because what I'm hearing a lot is what I'm hearing is a lot of the success is finding someone with aligning principles and essentially value systems.
Hmm.
Um, to because if you enter in with them as like, the example you gave was kids are not kids, but I'm sure there's many others in there. But I'm curious. Well, and again, what I'm impressed with is that you knew what your principles were heading in per se, or like can you give more examples of what these principles may have been early on that helps confirm knowing and giving that trust over to understand that this is going to work?
I mean, it's hard.
If anything comes to mind,
Yeah, I
let me
mean,
know.
like the things that come to mind are like I've stated already, just being a libertarian, having that, like it's almost counter to what I just said because about being independent in that sort of regard. Um, but just being a moral person, I guess, is the most important one is, and going back to the things I was speaking about my children having accountability, and the things like those as base pillars, they kind of weave out into so many different things and aspects of your life. And like, I wasn't religious, nor wasn't, religious in this, in the sense she is now either at the time we met. But even religion, I wouldn't say would be the, like, there's would be something that would have necessarily made us walk apart, because we still wanted to be good people. We wanted to have a family. We wanted to, um, yeah, it's hard, and now that you put it on me, it's hard to pinpoint, I guess, the exact principles that drive us together. It was more like, I guess, I could just feel it in my gut that we were like, when you're out of alignment with your partner in those values, I think it's a lot more present than when you're in alignment, because when you're in alignment, it just feels, you don't have those little feelings in your gut that are telling me this, yeah, I don't want to do this. And I think when you're with someone that you're forcing it, you get those little moments where you're just like, and maybe that's a better way of sensing it without putting labels on exactly what those pillars are. And and leaning in, I don't want to say leaning into the feelings when because I don't want to push people away from their relationships, but I guess just trying to be in tune as much as possible with
Yeah,
that sixth sense.
yeah. You're saying, like you said, you don't want to push people, but you want to it, the awareness of the feeling. Like don't necessarily ignore it, but don't take it as like, oh my gosh, this is this is the everything message. Like kind of listening to it and keeping track of it in a way is how I'm receiving it. And then, uh, sorry, you want
No, you're good.
to? Okay. You mentioned we kind of laugh a little bit about the independence thing, the counter, but I think there is an important message in there too, with like the importance of independence within like having your own self still, like avoiding the codependent trap of fully relying heavily and losing yourself in a relationship, which is something that I've become more familiar with, and not having as much of a principle in identifying who I am and how important I am, and the things that I need and want in life that are kind of like entwined and also kind of for me, like that sort of stuff. But
Hmm.
that's how I interpreted your independence aspect.
I would say it's more of like, maybe, I mean, there's a recipe that works for everyone, but I would say for me, it's definitely a majority of the relationship and a minority of the independence, though. I think, yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's many different ways that people have made it work, and that's beautiful too. But for me, I think I do lean in more so on, um, becoming this new unified unit,
Yeah.
and because in order to do that, you have to have trust, and that trust is also huge for maintaining the longevity of a relationship.
That sounds beautiful. Yeah, like you said the lean. I don't know. We keep using the word leaning, but that makes sense. Well, we're kind of nearing the end anyway. But I'll let me introduce a simpler question. Maybe I might be heading into a series of a phase of interviews and Zoom calls and conversations in a new path that I'm exploring. Um, I'll ask you for interview advice. What makes a good what has felt successful from your perspective in terms of giving that good first impression in that 15 minutes you have to land a job?
This is going to be bad advice, but my 100% success ratio as far as getting an offer is, I would always take two shots before the interview, about 20 to 30 minutes before the interview. And every time I've ever done that, I've gotten an offer. So, don't recommend, but I don't, I guess it's know your body, know yourself.
Uh-huh.
I, um, I don't drink very much these days, but, that worked for me. Whether or not it would work for you, I don't know. But it's
Okay.
the idea of liquid courage, I guess. And then you can, if you're at a point where you can get rid of the anxiety that you have about being in that situation, but you're still able to coherently answer all the questions, state all the things, to me, that's, you know, a net positive of like you are still able to answer the question effectively, but you're also not shooting yourself in the foot with the anxiety of the situation of being in an interview. And I guess that's where that comes from.
Okay, I'll say my fear is trying to balance confidence
Mm-hmm.
with a level of
Humility again? No.
humility, some sort of authenticity to kind of like admit up front that this confident like give a more honest view of like that this 15 minutes of pure confidence isn't necessarily how I'm going to carry myself every day in person. Like you're going to see a different guy like so kind of baking in some not necessarily I get the anxiety aspect of it, like finding some sort of foundation of at least confidence in the self, like I am who I am, and I'm gonna answer as truthfully and confidently as I am. But I don't.
I think
There's a balance in there. I'm
I think
going
that's
for.
bad. I think you should 100% put your best foot forward in every aspect and without any sort of like, yeah, but on once we get into it, I might do a little bit like, don't chop your legs off, because if you chop your legs off 5% to try to give some feeling of like, well, this may be more close to reality. Like, I'm not perfect. I'm not going to have this perfect moment, this perfect moment, this perfect moment. The whole point of a resume is to show your perfect moments. And these are the highlights of your career. These are the highlights of what you've done. And if you're undercutting your highlights, then you don't have highlights. And everyone understands that, you're putting your best foot forward. You don't need to chop your legs off. If you do that, then they're like, well, if he's has this reservation now, he's really actually way down here.
Hmm.
And so I would never try to kind of dial it back and say, unless you're really good at doing it, and kind of experienced in that way. But I think that's a bad advice, to
Thank
be
you.
blunt.
Thank you. No, it's appreciated, and I needed to hear that. That's helpful in the way of like the way that I'm receiving it is best foot forward, confidence, and almost a trust in like my I'm gonna I'm not lying. I'm
No,
not showing an alternate version of myself. I'm not pretending to be somebody who I'm not. I'm still myself, and they're just yeah. They're seeing
these are
they're
these are
seeing
Eddie's best moments.
yeah, and the other versions of me will read in a more almost like subconscious way, or like
Sure.
it's I'm still gonna show up in other ways that I don't have to lean into to show. I will still present as myself.
Yeah.
Woo! Thank you.
Yeah. Just, yeah, always best foot forward.
Any buzzwords that they'd love to hear in those interviews?
Nah, none come to mind. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, it's so. When was the last time that you had to do an interview? I'm thinking about the couple shots that you normally take.
I haven't done that as much as of late. I guess I've gotten more confidence as I've gotten older.
There we go.
Um, so fortunately, I don't do that anymore. But yeah, probably like, I don't know, 8 years ago or something like
Eight
that.
years?
But yeah, I used to do it every time, and it was,
Oh,
I
since okay.
what?
Since your last interview?
Oh, my last interview was with the academy, of course, and
Okay.
yeah, that one was there was multiple interviews. I mean, that whole process, I probably spent 40 hours doing the background check process and filling out interviews from every roommate I've ever had, of every place I've ever lived, and every like 4 employees of every job I've ever held. Which for someone who's 21 years old joining the academy is quite easy, but someone who's in their 30s is quite extensive. So that was a lot of work, which I'm glad paid off.
Yeah. And I remember getting the text, and I'm sure you were in the thick of getting all that out, but it was like, "Hey, Eddie, I used to live with you. I need to
Hmm.
can I think I had to take it. Like I don't know what the option would have been if I said no, but I think I had to say yes.
I think they would have just asked once more, then yeah, I don't think it would have been the. But yeah,
Yeah, I remember getting it.
appreciate you doing it.
Yeah, yeah, and it was even semi-extensive on my end too. It's like pretty they needed pretty lengthy answers
Hmm.
for most of it, and of course I gave glowing reviews, and I had a lot of confidence, and I'm glad it worked out.
Hmm.
I like to end the shows as we wind down here, looking to the future. Um, what is coming up? Maybe a couple of bullets on what you're excited about in the next year. We're currently in April of 2025, but yeah, what's happening this year for you that you're looking forward to?
Well, I'm always someone that has like the 3-year plan, the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan, and they haven't, often they haven't gone exactly as I've intended, and there's plenty of dreams I've had to let die, and there's plenty of dreams that I've had that are just postponed, and some of those, in the moment, I'm going to be a sheriff deputy, and I'm going to the goal there is to work towards detective, and then kind of see where God pulls me after that. I don't know exactly where my path will lead there. I just feel like there's something building and some reason I need to be in the role that I am. So I guess not really having a finite um, goal of where I'm going there. I have a couple other ideas and businesses that I want to help um, plant seeds in the future. Um, start getting some rental properties, just all of the above, and watch Nora's business flourish, hopefully, and most importantly, just be as present and available for my kids along the way as I can.
And then anything on, yeah, speaking of the kids and the family, any moments this year, I guess specifically, or in the future that you're looking forward to? I imagine that the kids have got tons going on and lots happening, and I'm just well, a little insight into some family excitement of future.
We're not having another kid at the. We're not pregnant, if that's what you're
No,
alluding to.
I was thinking
Um,
more like some sort
Not
of
that we won't be, but
some sort of graduation or championship game or I don't know what they're up to these days, but
I guess the most recent one is Berlin is going to do some gymnastics showcase in a couple months. But yeah, just to kind of, we're still at that stage where we're exploring where their interests are. So trying out different things, and that's that's fun too to kind of see where. Um, it's hard with 4 kids. I think that I've heard good advice that try to get your kids into the same thing and choose. I think it's one combat sport, one like I'm missing it, but like I think another one they were recommending was gymnastics because that gives you all around coordination in a bunch of different ways. Combat sports gives you discipline, and then like I forget what the third one was. So I guess it's not the best advice since I can't remember
yeah,
it.
so,
But
something to engage with others, something to engage the like almost like dance or
something
something.
for your mind, something for your body, something for discipline. I think is
Okay. So
yeah,
the arts are in there probably somewhere too. The
yeah,
mind is probably what that is. That's interesting. So yeah, it's a lot of exploration there. Sounds exciting.
yeah. Just trying to navigate the time of all that and figuring out the best way to do that. And it's hard, but
Great.
it's worthwhile.
Oh, that's awesome. No, I'm very excited to like I went on a walk with Nora yesterday and I was just like I've been away for so long. Like so I'm going on 7 years
Hmm.
of living out of Reno and I I miss you guys.
Hmm.
I miss you and I miss Nora and I m- m- almost in a way like I'm grieving not being here, getting to know the family more. Like
Hmm.
it sounds lovely to have that. So I look forward to seeing how it grows and to
Hmm.
see where you end up and to keep in touch. And thanks for being on the show.
Yeah.
And I saw you looking up now. But anything, any closing thoughts that maybe I didn't glean, or is anything else that is on your mind that you want to share before we
No, just
end it?
I'm just grateful for the most part, just allowing me to speak to my faith and hopefully, um, convince someone else to challenge their own preconceptions about faith in God. And again, I'm just still new to this whole thing, and so trying to do my best um, to speak about where I'm coming from, and hopefully, yeah,
Yeah,
be articulate in that regard.
thanks for sharing. But yeah, again, thanks for being on. That's the show. Leave a subscribe, leave a comment if you're on YouTube, and bye everybody.